Hello everybody, welcome to video number 2 of this wake-up call series. I am so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're showing up for yourself. Taking proactive steps is exactly what these videos are all about, and just by being here, you are doing that very thing. So I hope you are proud of yourself for showing up, which is particularly difficult in a time of challenge. In a time of challenge, the nervous system wants to contract, wants to hide out, wants to go to some kind of familiar distraction or gratification. And so the empowered self shows up and says, what is truly needed here? Where do I have gaps? And what do I need to fill in that will set me up better? That is the goal of these videos. I know it is entirely possible. And so, yay, you are here. So, I hope that you had a chance to watch the first video of this series, where we talked about the fact that we are in a time of global interruption. We talked about what a crisis equals. As a quick reminder, I said that that equals a situation where we feel unprepared to respond, where we don't feel that we have clear answers. And we can turn this time of crisis, where we don't have certain clear answers, and we can fill in a bunch of new approaches that will become wiser answers for what we face going forward in our lives. So, in video number 1, there was also an encouragement that you do an evaluation. Where am I now? What am I going through now? Am I happy with a lot of the old choices that I've been making? Or do you realize that some of the things you've been doing have been out of balance? Such as not spending a ton of time taking great care of you, building a healthy, vital body, taking care of yourself emotionally, taking care of the infrastructure of mutual value and support with other people in your life. So easy to get caught up in just trying to achieve and make money, or all sorts of distortions that make our lives less than fully balanced. So I hope you've begun to take that inventory in video number 1. If you haven't, I encourage you to go back and watch that. You can easily find it on the website, ronbaker.net. So if you did begin to take that inventory, it becomes a deeper sense of self-awareness. When you have self-awareness, you know what's missing, you know what's needed more fully. Just take it a step at a time. I'm happy to point out lots of steps going forward, but each time you show up to one of the videos and you actually do the exercise, it prepares you to feel safer and clearer, and you build a really strong foundation where you can stay calm and in charge of yourself within whatever's happening, such as in this time of global interrupt. So, do the inventory, and now we begin to move on to the next focus. Video 2 is being called A Wake-Up Call About Self. All the work that I've been doing over the last 25 years has been a response to me becoming aware how little I knew about myself, and how my educational systems taught me almost nothing, including my family and my parents. Almost nothing about self. And therefore I was going through the motions, but I was focused outside myself for the structures and the things and the money, and totally disconnected for the most part from myself. That never let me feel safe in my life. I didn't even know how unsafe I felt until I created a contrast of creating real connection to myself. Once I felt the contrast, I was like, how do we all manage going through our lives so focused outside the self, not feeling grounded, clear, and safe inside the self? So no matter where you are in that process, I encourage you to use these focuses in this video as a test for yourself. How clear am I about self? And then no matter how much you already know, build on that and take whatever level you find yourself today to the next levels of connection, awareness, and nurturing of self. So we're going to start out with a clear map of self. I hinted at it in video number 1. There are 3 levels of self. Why do I make them concentric circles that get bigger and bigger? It's because we start out with a foundation of self. Let's just give it the metaphor of school. It's like going to first grade and we build this initial foundation, and that each grade we go to, we learn more and we build on the foundation of what came before it. Now let's go to a much bigger scale of self, and it's not just linear grades, but it is 3 primary parts of self. And each one of those parts has more potential, more sense of confidence, more trust of self and trust of life, and a capacity for fulfillment. There is no way to overstate how having a clear, empowered sense of self impacts every single part of your life. So could you name what those 3 facets of self happen to be? If I said there are 3 different levels of consciousness, I'm not going to get all fancy on you. We don't have time to go into a million details, but I want to point out that most people don't have this education about self, so no worries. Do not feel that you are alone, but I want to make it clearer to you. There are many levels to this. So just because the words are going to sound familiar, don't think that equals that we have moved into the more advanced parts of self just because you recognize the words. We're going to call it, for sake of simplicity, the child level of self, the adult level of self, and the soul level of self. All 3 exist inside us from the time we're born. But clearly, you can only access a certain amount when you're in first grade versus when you're in high school versus when you're a young adult. This is the same basic principle. However, just because you move from child to adult in a physical body does not remotely mean that you moved from child consciousness to empowered adult consciousness. I'm going to give you a way to measure that for yourself. Let's just talk about some of the symptoms of each of these first 2, child and adult. In this time of crisis, in this time of interrupt, in this time of being quarantined in your homes, you'll discover whether you have found yourself more in child survival consciousness or empowered adult consciousness. Some examples of child: we feel inadequate, uninformed, unsure. We don't feel like we have the answers. We look out, like we did as children, to authority figures. Now, to some degree, this is healthy. I look to authority figures in medicine, in finance, in many areas of my life that I haven't spent so much time developing. But I don't do it because I feel afraid and unsure. I do it because it's a smart choice. I want to get the expertise of other people and allow them to continue to enhance me. So the child does not feel that way. The child just feels afraid, alone, unsure, reactive, defensive, like a child would be. A child will act out when they feel threatened. Oh, I don't like that, as an example. This does not serve the adult. what are some qualities of empowered adult? I'm in charge of myself. I am in a constant process of growing and developing all facets of my life. Where I don't have answers, I can go and seek out those answers, and then I show up to apply them. I set my life up better and better and better, and I feel safe within the process of learning curves, moving from one level to the next, to the next. I feel safe with the process of trial and error. I know how to nurture and respond emotionally to any parts of myself that are still trapped in fear, shame, and judgment. These are qualities of an empowered adult. I live in the same world that you do, and even before this crisis, what I just described is not what I see most often. However, the great news, all of my clients grow from wounded child into empowered adult in such beautiful, clear, safe ways. It is a growing layer by layer process that gets better and better and better. Entirely possible. That's why I'm making these videos, to help you understand in this time of crisis. Have you gone more into contraction, separation, defense, acting out, feeling like you are alone and you have no choices? Many people have, and I would say to some degree, all of us have parts of self that are still trapped or limited in child consciousness. However, the adult part of us can recognize it. The adult part of us can show up and can respond and help that part of self that needs the education and the consistent nurturing. Those two things will help you more than anything. That's why I'm here doing these videos, so that you get clear, consistent support with a video in your inbox every 3 days, and that you have tools. You also have the capacity to reach out to me to ask your questions. This is what an adult in charge of self would do. Showing up, using time wisely, becoming empowered. Now, I'm going to briefly mention from the child to the adult. I mentioned there was a third level, the soul level. I'm going to talk about that in the next video, so that's the reason I haven't mentioned it in this one. We have way too much to negotiate here. So do another inventory for yourself with no judgment. We are all negotiating some very, very tender things in this time. There is nothing to be ashamed about if you discover that you are caught in a lot of fear and anxiety. No problem. I spent decades of my life very trapped in that. That's why I dedicated my life to healing that, empowering myself, and then the last 29 years, I said 25 in the intro, it's really 29. The last 29 years, passing this on to other people. I know that every single person who is willing to show up can start with where you are now. So let's do some inventory now and know that you can build on that. It doesn't do any good to beat yourself up for where you are now. It's simply where you are now. Why would we beat ourselves up by going, I can't believe I'm in that specific grade? What's the point? The grade you're in is perfect for the next levels of your learning. So it is crucial that we show up and we learn to build on that going forward. So what can you do? Inventory. How safe have I felt with my feelings? Do I know how to nurture my feelings? Do I know how to calm myself? Do I know how to respond in a time of challenge? Most people have a lot of room for improvement on each one of those things. I say all the time, no matter how far I evolve myself, I can always improve every part of my life. So start with where you are today, and I'm going to teach you a specific proactive exercise that you can begin to do. When you begin to understand, I'm going to stand for a second for the video. When you begin to understand that this lower part of the body is where the child part lives in your nervous system, this part of the upper torso is where the adult part of you resides. I'm not going to go into that in great detail, except I wanted to mention it because most people aren't very connected to the lower child part once there's any kind of contraction, which happens right here in the solar plexus. So, I want to teach you how to connect into that part of your body with some proactive breathing. Just tune in and pay attention to how you're breathing at the moment. Don't change a thing. Just see how you're breathing. I can almost guarantee you that most people breathe very shallow. Why? Because they're trying to escape without even knowing it from all of the stuff that's trapped in the child self. Anything that you didn't feel confident about in that initial growing up time. Well, the good news, you're now an adult self. Potentially. The adult part of you is the one listening to this video. And that part of you can begin to nurture and respond. And so what we want to do is begin to take some proactive, nurturing breaths. We're going to take a slow breath in the nose that fills up the belly. And then we're going to breathe out the mouth in a very proactive way. Rather than taking tons of time with this, I'm just going to go ahead and show you the kind of breath that I encourage. So I'll go up here so you can see my belly. I fill that up, and then I breathe out. Sending the air to the far side of the room. What? This is very different than proactive breathing most people do. Particularly the out breath. How often have I watched people say to groups of people, take a deep breath, and they'll go, and then there's no proactive out breath that follows. And they just assume people know how to take deep breaths. I know from the last 29 years that is not true. So particularly in a time of anxiety or fear or crisis, this breath will make a huge difference in your experience. So take 3 breaths with me. We're going to take in breath through the nose, out breath through the mouth, and then go into a couple of seconds of stillness because we want to use this breath to calm the nervous system. So take the first breath with your eyes open, and then I'm going to get you to close your eyes for the next 2. So breathe with me, filling up the belly, stillness, stillness. Put one hand on your lower belly and close your eyes. Take another deep breath, out the mouth, stillness, calm, quiet. Another breath in the nose, out the mouth, stillness, calm. Opening your eyes and coming back into the space. Super important that you begin to practice nurturing yourself, starting with this breathing. So what else can you do in this first week? Start to pay attention to yourself over the next few days. Are you more typically in the child, fearful, contracted, shut down? If you find that to be true, breathe, nurture, and remind yourself of some adult realities. Right now in this moment, is there anything actually threatening taking place? I know there's stuff going on out there in the world, but guess what? There has been stuff going on out there in the world every day of our lifetimes. Some stuff. Now, yes, this is a more shared challenge, but right now, in this moment, this very moment, pay attention to how safe you are in adult reality. Remind yourself you have choices. Remind yourself that support is possible. Right here with me as an example. Reach out to other people. Remind yourself. Call, FaceTime other people. Connect. Go through this together, not alone. Reach out to the people, not that you wish would be supportive, but the ones you trust are most supportive. It's also fine to reach out to all of those you want to encourage, but don't necessarily look to the ones who are the most unreliable in your typical life to be the main support. The adult says, I am the main support in my own life. Then I make discerning choices and reach out to others, the ones that are most likely to be willing to do this together, to go through this together. We don't have to save each other. We don't have to fix each other. We just need to do it together in a mutual support. Listen, share, and breathe. These are some of the adult choices that you can make to help with the child parts of self that feel afraid and unaware. You might even imagine the child part of you on the inside, like a child would imagine, and talk to that part of yourself, assuring the child that you are showing up as the adult, that you are learning healthier new things. Take it one step at a time. Reach out to me if you have questions, and I look forward to sharing more perspectives with you going forward. I want to close with a couple of reminders. If you tell your friends about this video series, you'll be able to go through this specific process with other people, not alone. It'll give you a starting place of things you can talk about with your friends and loved ones. So encourage people to start from video number 1 by going to my website, ronbaker.net. It's right there toward the top of the page where it says signing up for this proactive response to the coronavirus crisis. So with that said, I look forward to seeing you in a few days, and I hope that by that point, you will be clearer about your inventories and you will already be breathing 3 times a day for 1 minute. Don't overdo it. You don't need to do this breath constantly because you can overwhelm your nervous system. 3 times a day, 1 minute, and get used to creating that calm space, and then move into whatever your next activity is, calmer than you would have otherwise. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you soon. All the best. Sending love your way.